Technically, the role of the school board is to hire and fire a superintendent and to set and follow policy. My understanding is that is the specific role. Personally, even before I was elected, I felt that it was very important for school board members to also act as an ambassador for our community and our district. I just think it's important to get the word out. I think it's more common to hear negative reports than positive. Therefore, I think it's very important to not only be a part of that dialogue or those stories, as in being involved in the schools that I represent, and actually all the schools, but to also tell that story. We are definitely to govern and not to micromanage. That is the superintendent's role. But I've experienced a very hands-on approach with this superintendent, and would hope to with any other in the future. I hope we don't have another superintendent, but I think he's doing a fine job. But I do think the open dialogue is very important to communicate, even though it is his role to run the district. I do think it's a member's role to be very hands-on and very involved and to understand what's going on, but to govern. Well, I cannot say that before I was in this role that I experienced a budget of this size. Who has? But I am a small business owner individually, as well as a business owner with my husband, and have been for really my whole adult life. So working within a budget is definitely within my realm of thinking. Sometimes there are very difficult decisions that have to be made, as we have made in the last 4 years, some difficult decisions as far as budgeting. But I also think we've done a good job. So I do think my experience as a business owner really has prepared me to work with this type of information. As far as how they relate to the children, or just in general? Okay.
Just how
however,
you interpret the question.
Okay. Obviously, working with our impoverished or failing schools, as you might say, with the transformation zone, the transformation next zone, is working very well. We've seen incredible results with changing our way of thinking, of dealing with these schools and these children. So I definitely think that is working well. As far as not working well, it's very difficult for me to say anything particular that we're doing is not working well, because we're always changing. I mean, even if there's some small facet of an area not working well, it's constantly changing. I do think that not being able to educate our children before the kindergarten age is a problem. Now, again, we don't have a program for universal pre-K, but I do see that as a focus in the immediate future. And so maybe in that arena, we need to work harder. This is definitely an issue of concern. We all know that before our lifetimes this began, and it continued to snowball through the years and create a problem. And I am aware that the district's portion of the retirement that we paid in last year for the $492 million budget was over $57 million. So we are definitely paying a higher percentage than what would be the norm to bring that number down. As far as the insurance portion, we're paying an additional funds on that as well. And I just think we need to continue to be diligent and pay those extra funds every year to get that number down. It's scary to think that something could happen in the future where we had retirees that were not covered, and my goal, and I would say that's not going to happen. We're just going to have to really dig deep and figure out how to get that money paid back to catch up. Obviously, this is a very difficult conversation, and as we've closed 4 schools since I was in office, and actually I was president of the board when we closed the high school, and that was probably one of the most difficult things that we ever did, because you're not just talking about a school, you're talking about a community that has relied on that source for their educating their children. It's, you know, it's just part of a community, and it's very, very difficult. I do think we have to continue to follow our strategic plan, and that is right size our district. To have a complete answer for the whole district as to how that has to be handled, I can't say that I have a perfect answer for that, but I do think that we have to take those communities and look at the outlying communities and try to create maybe even a central school we have so many small schools, and when you have small schools, you don't have the resources that you need. So if there's a way that we could have the communities to work with us and combine these schools into maybe a little bit larger school to have more offerings, and to again hopefully cut down on a lot of that overhead, but work more directly with the children and give them, funnel more of the funds to them so they can benefit from that. Again, I sort of go back to my original comment of being ambassadors for our schools. I think as much as I am an ambassador for the district, I'm probably closer tied to each individual school. And each individual school has a principal, and I consider the principal as running that school. They've been hired to run that school. It's no one else's position to micromanage that person. So on a district level, I think a board member working directly with that principal, seeing if they're having challenges, how you can work with them, is very, very important. But I vote for every single decision in the whole district. And I can't get things done in my district if I don't have, 6 other votes with me. So I think as a whole, there doesn't have to be a decisive, are you for your district, or are you for, the Caddo Parish School Board. I truly believe that we are all working together as a group, and need to work together as a group as a whole. But as far as my specific district, I think being more hands-on, and each should be in their own district hands-on, it's a way for us to have some cohesiveness and work together. Right after I came on board on the school board 4 years ago, I saw this little dissension of my district, your district, and so I worked with the board attorney and created a code of ethics, and it was voted for. I proposed it and it voted for. Everyone agreed that we have this code of ethics, that we're working together as a community because let's face it, we are all for Caddo Parish schools. So I feel like that has worked very well. So me as a person, I do feel working as, with the district as a whole, but to be very hands-on with my own personal district. Ethics and integrity are very important to me. They're what I live by. As I said in my previous conversation, I think it's very important to be ethical, whether it's your day-to-day life, your community, or whatever. So I have to say, I don't know that I've ever felt it was tested, because those are black and white to me. I wouldn't make an unethical or any kind of decision that had to do with my integrity. Now, being my integrity or ethics being questioned, which is the other way I might interpret this, when I read on social media things that are completely untrue about me, that's very difficult. It's very difficult to keep my integrity at that point, but I do. And so I just think those are 2 of the most important things, traits you could have as an individual, especially in this role. I would say my number one priority from a much larger lens is to continue to follow this strategic plan. It was created for a reason. It has worked very well for us. And I would continue to work with each board member and each staff member to see how we can bring that to fruition. Obviously, it's a living, breathing document and it has to change, but it is our roadmap. And so I think it is very important to stick to those roots and to stay with the course on that. Can you repeat the question again, the second part?
What 2 priorities do you have as a school board member, and how will you work collaboratively with other board members to integrate these priorities into the work of the board?
I think you have to think big if you're going to sit in this role, and again, going into another 4 years, I believe, gives me an advantage of having some history and understanding so much more than I did before I started. But I also, there are some realistic visions, but I also think we have to have what may be considered as an unrealistic vision or a big dream. And my big dream would be to have universal pre-K. I've started doing a little research on my own, and you know, I just think until we catch these children a little younger, these children that are not being read to at home and, you know, don't have the support system that a lot of the children have in our community, I think until we reach them earlier, we're going to continue to struggle. So I would say this would definitely be a priority. I know it's a priority of some of the other board members. So I've just heard them speak publicly. We've not had any private conversations, but I just feel that this really needs to be a focus to see how we can create this and bring it to fruition for our community. I do think you have covered a lot. You've covered a lot of the main topics, and you've covered a lot of what has already been started these last 4 years. I do think it's important to point out that the current board and administration has adopted Tier 1 curriculum throughout the parish, which is the highest level. So I'm hoping that this will continue to educate our children. I mean, we have had a lot of confusion from the state these last few years, well, really for longer than that, but just since I've been on board, I've seen a lot of confusion. So I do think the focus of our current staff and board has been to streamline and to figure out the best way to get just a consistent education for our children. And I do think we are working that direction. I do think it works really well. I enjoy working in this position. When I first decided to run 4 years ago, there was question, what in the world are you doing? And you know, when I stepped into the position, I kind of thought that myself, but as I dug deep and understood my own self, I'm a very hard worker. I'm a doer. I'm not a politician. I'm not crazy about talking about myself, but I do really love doing this work, and I think this work is very important. My history with having 3 adult children, spent 24 collective years in the parish, my involvement in the parish, my involvement with Providence House, working with the homeless, knowing that that's a direct result of lack of education. I think I bring a lot to the table, and I feel like I'm just getting started.